because he was eating dogs and chasing children.
we're ready.
Hare Krishna, my dear devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Grantaraj ki jai. Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, today we will finish text 18 and then go on to text 19. So, text 18 says, the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharata. Basically, that the verse says that the material body is cannot live forever, and it's going to come to an end. But the soul is eternal. Okay, so the purport says the material body is perishable by nature. It may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of time only. There is no chance of maintaining it indefinitely. But the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. In other words, you can't kill the spirit soul. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have an idea how to measure its dimension. From both viewpoints, there is no cause of lamentation, because the living entity, as he cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. The minute particle of the whole spirit acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutras, the living entity is qualified as light because he is part and parcel of the supreme light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations. So basically, the hesitation of Arjuna to fight was because he was attached to his relatives. And that means that he was bodily attached. And he was ready to violate his vow as a Kshatriya to protect the principles of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal principles of the people's occupational duties. So therefore, Arjuna was in Maya, basically, not able to do what his duty was. And therefore, there has to be some discussion here to understand, to convince Arjuna to do his duty. So how do you convince people? You educate them. And that's what Krishna is doing now. He's beginning to educate Arjuna to understand the difference between the body and the soul. And the fact that, okay, his relatives might be killed, but they're not really killed because they have eternal souls. Everybody's soul is eternal. It's just going to change their bodies. So there's no reason to lament. So some people might find this argument a little strange, right? But actually, it's a fact. No one ever really dies because everybody has an eternal soul. And if they die thinking of Krishna, they go back to Godhead. Or if they can't remember Krishna, but they've done a lot of service in the past, at least they get another human body to, finish the work of going back to Godhead. So, in order to convince Arjuna, Krishna starts talking about the atomic soul. Mm-hmm. And not only the atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity, but it's impossible to measure the size of the atomic soul because it's basically smaller than the atom. But we know it's there because of consciousness. And as soon as a person dies and the soul leaves the body, consciousness also stops immediately. So all these things are being discussed. And Prabhupada says, the individual's atomic soul is definitely there in the heart, along with the supersoul. And thus, all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. That's the previous verse, 17. The corpuscles which carry the oxygen from the lungs gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. So basically, Krishna has to convince Arjuna that although he's going to have to kill the bodies of his relatives, they don't actually die. In fact, it's blessing because now they'll get a new body. Right? Because why? Because they're not sinful. They're following more or less the rules and regulations of being kshatriyas, and therefore it's a wonderful thing for a kshatriya to die in the battlefields, right? And therefore immediately they'll go to the heavenly planets, right? And have a better body than what they have now, and then later on they'll come back again, and they can make hopefully more spiritual advancement, and finally go back to Godhead. So basically, Prabhupada says, look, there's no chance of maintaining the body indefinitely. Point one. But the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. So, as mentioned in the previous verse, it is, who is that? Is that Mandavija? Mm-hmm. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So, from both viewpoints, that is one, so the body is never going to, the body is always going to die, right? And two, the soul cannot be killed. So,
the spirit soul is so minute, it cannot be even seen by an enemy. So,
yes,
how can
not going to be killed, right? So, therefore, from both points, from both viewpoints, there's no cause of lamentation because the living entity, as he is, cannot be killed nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. The minute particle, the whole spirit, acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutra, the living entity is qualified as light because he is part and parcel of the supreme light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations. So that's the main point. He's going to sacrifice the cause of religion. What's the cause of religion? Well, you have to protect the principles of Sanatana Dharma. And you can't, say, well, no, I'm not going to fight because these are my relatives. But if the relatives are violating the principles of Sanatana Dharma, then it's the rule of, like, for example, let's say there's a man that's choking somebody's wife, and the husband calls the police. The policeman comes and he says, "What's the problem?" He said, "There's this man choking my wife." He said, "Why don't you go and stop it?" Okay, so the policeman gets his gun, goes into the room where the wife is being choked, and then he comes back. So the husband says, "So what happened?" He said, "Well, yeah, you're right. There's a man choking your wife." He said, "Okay, but what happened?" He said, "Well, I can't really do anything because the guy that's choking your wife is my brother. And I promised my mother I would never harm him. So I'll call another policeman and he'll come." He said, but my wife would be dead by then." He said, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything." You know. What do you mean by that?
His duty as a policeman is much more important than his duty as a brother.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Yeah.
he's following the second level of dharma instead of following the first level.
Exactly. Yes. So, but that would not be acceptable, right?
Yeah.
He has an oath that he has to protect people.
By saying
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I think we can go to text 19. Ya inam vitihantaram yas chainam mandyate hatam uboto na bijanito nayam hanti nahanyate. Okay, so now we're going to start hearing a lot of information about the soul. And it says, neither he who thinks the living entity is slayer, nor he who thinks it's slain is in knowledge. Let me see that again. Wait a minute. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it's slain is in knowledge, for the self slays not, nor is slain. Purport. When an embodied, yeah. No, I understand it now. Yeah. I just had to read it 2 times. When an embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons, it is to be known that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it's impossible to kill him by any material weapon, as will be evident from the subsequent. Nor is the living entity killable because of his spiritual constitution. What is killed or is supposed to be killed is the body only. This, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is Ma Himsyat Sarvabhutani. Never commit violence to anyone. Nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjuna, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. What's the principle of a religion? Well, when there's people like Duryodhana who are willing to violate the rules of Dharma, if you can't convince them to stop, then there has to be a battle. Now, Arjuna tried everything possible not to fight. And also, Krishna went to Duryodhana and basically said, look, the Pandavas, they have a right to their inheritance, but they're willing to just be satisfied with one village each. And you can have the rest of the kingdom. And then Duryodhana says, I won't even give them enough earth to put a pin into.
In those days, the kings used to try their best not to wage a war. They used to do all kinds of negotiation before they enter the war. Is that happening now?
Yes.
They still do this. Like for
I see what you mean. Yeah. Well, Arjuna, Krishna is doing it. Oh, now, no, it's
did they have those negotiations on trying not to do the war?
well, that's why they have the United Nations, right? The United Nations is supposed to stop all wars, where people can discuss things, but it doesn't really work that well.
Right now, they proposed a ceasefire.
Yeah.
But still, they have not agreed, and they're still negotiating.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, the whole idea of the United Nations was by bringing these people together on a permanent basis. They would always discuss things and work things out without fighting. But it hasn't really stopped the wars, unfortunately. The idea of the United Nations was good. What the whole word, United Nations, but it hasn't really worked. Why? Because the people are not following Sanatana Dharma. Therefore, there's going to be war. See, just because you create the United Nations doesn't mean there's not going to be war again. But if you educate people properly, then by discussing things, it's possible to come to proper understanding and avoid unnecessary wars. Yeah. Okay. Now, see, the United Nations does have an army also, but it's not a really strong army. So it's just basically an army to keep people from killing each other. But it's not strong enough to stop people. Yeah. All right. So killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjuna, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsy. So that's the main point. Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitava nabhuya ajo nitya sasvatam yam purano nahanyate hanyamane sarire. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So that's pretty definitive there. There's no doubt that the soul is eternal. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Spirit, but that's qualitatively. He undergoes no changes like the body. Sometimes the soul is called the steady or kutastha because it doesn't change. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body, remains for some time, grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a new body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death, and because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever existing, and primeval, meaning the soul existed in the past, the soul exists in the present, and the soul will continue to exist in the future. So he's eternal in the past, the present, and the future. So there's complete eternality there. That is, there is no chance in history of his coming into being. No, and because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever existing, and primeval. That is, there is no chance in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of birth, etc., of the soul. The soul does not at any time become old as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree or anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls, and owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from the 6 changes of the body. In the Katha Upanishad 1.2.18, we also find a similar passage which reads, Najayate mriyate va vipaschin, nayam kutaschin cha babu vakaschit. Ajo nitya sasvatoyam purano nahanyate hanyamane sarita. The meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in the Bhagavad Gita, but here in this verse there is one special word, vipaschit, which means learned or knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is a symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the body where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to clouds or for some other reason, but the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is therefore daytime. As soon as there is a little light in the sky early, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. This consciousness of the soul is, however, different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teachings of Bhagavad Gita would be useless. There are 2 kinds of souls, namely the minute particle soul, Anu Atma, and the super soul, Vibhu Atma. This is also confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.20. Anor Aniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atmasya Jantor Nihito Guhayam Tam Akratu Pasyati Vita Soko Datu Prasadam Mahimanam Atmana. Both the super soul, Paramatma, and the atomic soul, Jivatma, are situated on the same tree of the body within the same heart of the living being. And only one who has become free from all material desires, as well as lamentation, can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of the soul. Krishna is the fountainhead of the super soul also, as it will be discussed in the following chapters. And Arjuna is the atomic soul. Forgetfulness of his real nature, therefore,
forgetful
of his real forgetful of his real nature, therefore, he requires to be enlightened by Krishna or by his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. Right? Is that what you're reading also?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this verse that's quoted, Anora Niyan Mahatomahiyan Atmasya Jantur Nihito Guhayam Tamat Tu Pasyati Vitasoko Datu Pushadan Mahimanam Atmana. It's a very important verse. Both the super soul, Paramatma, and the atomic soul, Jivatma, are situated in the same tree of the body, within the same heart of the living being, and only one who has become free from all material desires as well as lamentations can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of the soul. Well, let's see. Talking about the soul, I saw something very interesting in the newspaper today, well, on the internet. No, that's not it. And is it here?
It's a printed paper, Maharaj? Or on the phone?
Wait, where?
No, are you referring to a paper or are you referring? No, you said it is something newspaper.
Yeah. Anyway, it's in myself.
Yeah.
Let's see, where does it say that? Okay, so there was an article on Popular Mechanics. Every single cell in your body could be conscious, scientists say. That could rewrite everything we know about human evolution. Well, when it says every single cell in your body could be conscious, that means every single cell is a living entity, which is Vedic philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that. But now they're guessing that that could be true.
37 trillion cells.
Yeah. That's a lot of people. Okay.
Everybody has a kingdom.
Yeah, everyone's a king.
One who has become free from all material desires as well as lamentation, and by the grace of Supreme understand the glory.
Yes.
Both the super soul and the atomic soul are situated on the same tree of the body, within the same heart of the living being, and only one who has become free from all material desires as well as lamentation. Why did Prabhupada say as well as lamentations?
Desires and lamentations. One is past and the other one is future.
Well, when you have lamentations, that means you're in Maya. You're lamenting for something that is not really worth lamenting. So that's Arjuna's problem. He's lamenting, and therefore is not willing to follow Krishna's order.
Basically, he doesn't have material desires, but he has lamentations.
Yes.
The lamentations of something material.
Lamentation for his relatives.
What are you?
Because something's going to happen because he's attached to them materially, not spiritually. And he's willing to violate his duty based on this false attachment to the bodies of his immediate and extended family. And he's willing to say no to Krishna, although Krishna is ordering him. So that's pretty serious. And it's not befitting him. He's not a low-class person. He's coming from an exalted family, right? And therefore, he's violating the, the culture that he was brought up in, and the culture in which he's made vows to maintain. So it's pretty serious. Let's say that would be called pretty serious words that they use. No, well, it is an offense, but it's a dereliction of duty. Dereliction of duty. Write that down. It's a good phrase.
Dereliction.
Dereliction of duties. What's it say?
State of having been abandoned or become dilapidated.
Dilapidated.
Okay, that's the first definition. Second.
Yeah, I think the next one. Shameful failure to fulfill one's obligations.
Exactly. Exactly. It's dereliction of duty. They can court martial you in the United States Army if you do that, put you in jail. If you refuse to follow orders. Now this is serious because they're right in the battlefield, they're ready to fight. And in the middle of the battlefield, he throws down his bow and arrow and says, I'm not going to fight. Because he's attached to the bodies of his family members, both sides of the family. So that's dereliction of duty. Okay, so I think we might stop there. Does anyone want to ask a question?
Any questions online? Yes, Sadhujari Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribol Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So the consciousness and soul both are in eternal status, right, Maharaj? Because wherever, because after the soul leaves the body, consciousness will go along with the soul, right, Maharaj?
Now, consciousness means your awareness. So when you die, are you aware of it? Are you aware? Well, yes. You die, but you'll be aware of it,
So I get the next body based on the consciousness I have when I die, right? So
what happens is, first of all, when you die, you'll go into a sleep period. And now your question is very good. I'm glad you asked that question.
Isn't there, Maharaj, like there is a subtle body still, right? And the subtle body still can, because it's Maya covered. So the consciousness could still be, just like we sleep, we're kind of technically conscious, but we're not aware of our consciousness. And in the sense like the body is still operating and everything. So in that sense, we can be put into this 4 states of consciousness, like the deep sleep and
Yes, yes.
awake and
Yeah.
the 4 states of
Well,
consciousness.
that's what happens when you die. You go into a deep state of sleep,
Correct.
and once a decision has been made by the devas, what your next body is going to be. Let's say you're going to have another body of a human being. Then, after 7 months in the womb of your mother, your consciousness
Again awakens.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what we read the other day.
we read that. Yeah. Now, let's say you're going to take birth as a worm, right? So, does the worm become conscious after 7 months or whatever period it is? Obviously, because it starts to move, right? And it's starting to seek food and things like that. But it's better we stick with the human beings. After 7 months, the human being becomes conscious that they have some kind of body and they're trying to get the heck out of their wife's womb because it's very uncomfortable for them.
So, Maharaj, that consciousness is actually the consciousness of previous life, right?
They are conscious of their previous life in the womb, but as soon as they're born, they forget it.
Mm.
They forget it because of the pain inflicted on them. So usually, now look, the child or the fetus is pushed down and has to come out of the womb of the mother. Now the orifice of that they have to pass through is very small. So if there's no cesarean, let's say, let's keep the cesarean apart. When a new baby is pushed out, you will see, first of all, that it's the head is very soft, and then you'll see the lines where the head was squeezed, and it's not in normal shape.
It's like a cone shape.
Yeah. Soon it's going to come to the right look, but it had to go through the orifice of the vagina of the mother, and it got squeezed very, very severely. Usually what happens is that causes a loss of memory of the child the fetus is conscious after 7 months of who they were previously, and the fetus is praying also to Krishna to get me out of here. But when they are actually pushed out, the trauma and the pain is excruciating, as it would be. Like, let's say somebody puts a clamp on your head and it tightens it, you make you go crazy and eventually you would die, right?
I can also relate to yesterday we planted the new beets, Maharaj. So we had to take out the beet from the original soil.
Yeah.
And then we planted there.
Yeah.
So right now they feel like a little
soft,
in a shock, right? Because there's a shift in their existence from this one. And then I can also relate to my own personal experience. I fell once and broke my wrist.
Oh my God.
Instantly, I mean, this is like the body kicked in, like I could see, like within like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I saw that my wrist broke and it's a complete radial fracture. And then I saw this, and then immediately I fainted. I didn't know for the next 1 hour what happened because they took me to the hospital.
Yeah.
So you see that the body has the natural.
Yeah, when you get extreme pain.
Extreme pain.
Yeah, you faint.
You faint.
Yeah.
And then you forget everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's what this is like.
No, not only that, you can actually see lines on the head. First of all, the head is not like a normal shape. It's more like a like a football, right?
Elliptical.
Right. And then gradually, after a couple of days, it comes back to the right shape. So that is so excruciating. Pain is so excruciating that it causes amnesia.
Yeah.
And the living entity forgets everything of their past. Right? And you can see every child that's born is always crying. You know, they're not laughing when they come out, they're crying because it's been very painful for them. Now, the only question is, what if you have a cesarean birth, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's even if it's a cesarean birth, the baby is crying.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying more like this, the plant, the
Yeah,
cesarean, it may not be a physical pain,
Yeah.
but the fact that you were in a comfort, you
Yeah.
got used to one zone,
Yeah.
and then suddenly you're put into a completely different zone because now the baby has to learn how to breathe,
Yeah.
how to,
Well, you know how to make them breathe? They slap them.
yeah. So it's basically a complete change of their environment from like
Yeah.
what they were used to.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So that puts them in that shock,
Yeah.
same shock, even though it's not physical pain.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I had my baby cesarean.
you did. Okay.
Both babies.
Both of them.
First baby was very heavy, like 9.5 pounds.
Wow.
So she could. I was in labor for a long time. She
That
didn't.
must have been like very painful.
Painful, yeah. So they finally did C-section, but the baby was crying. The baby was not laughing.
Oh, no, of course.
In both the cases, the kids were. But actually,
All kids are
as
crying.
you said, she didn't cry right away, right? And then they had to
No,
Pull her out.
pull her out upside down.
Yeah.
That's when
Wow.
they do all things to bring that awareness.
Well, she was protected in the womb. Now that she doesn't feel protected, she's upside down and she doesn't know what's happening. Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy. And it's not, it was not a rare thing in the past that, many women would die in having birthing babies. Yeah.
I mean, this is
It
all
happens
Maya.
even now. It happens even now.
I mean, we can see that this is actually somewhat blessing of Maya,
Yeah.
right? Because if, let's say, in that
If
pain,
you remember
we remember the pain,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be able to bear it. It's like
No, that's
by
correct.
putting you in
Yeah.
an unconscious state,
Yeah.
Maya helped you in a
No,
way.
when you have lower level of consciousness, you can let's see, uh, you can tolerate the pain.
Right.
Like, for example, when they give you Novocaine.
Yeah.
Now, actually, they're hurting you, and it really hurts bad, but because of the numbness, you're not feeling anything. Later on, when the Novocaine wears off, then you start feeling the pain. Then you have to take, different types of medicines to make you forget about the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we will stop right there. Hari Bol, where's the
Hari-
flower pot? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
See you in the morning.